Welcome back to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana. The prints I'm working on today are going to have layers in them as I've done previously, but today I wanted to focus on a couple of the different mediums that I'm using. So I do like having kind of like a grungy texture in the beginning of my print, and that's where I use some black, and I'm just putting down a nice thin layer. This is just a Mars black, and then I roll it out very thin until I feel like I can remove some of it with a piece of paper. This is the look that we're going to be getting from this print. It's nice and layered. It's got lots of kind of grunginess to it, but also some color, and the black isn't overwhelming. So this is just a piece of copy paper, and I'm really quickly pushing it on the plate in different areas and lifting it up very fast. I don't want to completely remove the black paint. I just want it to have a little bit of grunginess and just a little bit left over. Then I do let the paint dry, and now I'm bringing in a stencil, a THoltz stencil, and then I wanted to do some alcohol inks over the top. Some of my alcohol inks are hard to open, and using this little tool that I've shared in a previous video is so helpful. And I'm putting in kind of warm colors here. I've got some yellow right now that I'm doing, and I'm going to do some of that boysenberry purple, which is a beautiful purple. I love this purple, and it actually goes really well with yellow. It has a warmer tone to it, so it almost makes like an orange when you mix the two together. And I'm just using a 2-inch brayer to move some of that color around in that stencil area. Now, as the alcohol ink is starting to dry, but before it completely dries, I like to add a little bit more texture over the stencil. And I'm using this, it's called Tiny Bubbles embossing folder over cardstock. And I just use that to get a little bit more of a design in the alcohol ink. And of course, I've got this spot over on the other side of my gel print that needs some alcohol inks, and I'm just adding the rest of my warm colors. Got some warm orange and red colors, and again I'm blending those together. And then for the design or impression on this one, I'm going to use it's another embossed piece of cardstock, and this one has some alphabet characters on them. They're just kind of wonky. I really love this texture. And then I do let that layer dry completely before I go in with this next layer. I do like adding a little bit of shininess to my background, and with the Perfect Pearls and alcohol ink, because alcohol ink is a transparent ink, the Perfect Pearls shine behind the alcohol ink and around it where there's gel plate that's visible. So I like that I can use this stencil and create still another layer of some texture, but also bring in these perfect pearls that cause the background to kind of take on a nice shine. And of course, now I want to add in some of my golden fluid acrylic paint. I've got a yellow and a teal, and together those are going to make a pretty green color. So I'm starting to pull in some of my cooler tones behind those warm tones. And I've got another really cool embossing folder that I used for this cardstock. I think this one is it says Paris on it or something, but I just really love how it's the layers of the script on this one. It goes so well on the gel plate. And again, I don't want to remove all of it, and I have some spots that I didn't get, so I can bring in another one of my embossing folders and just keep removing until I'm happy with how it looks. I let that dry, and now I want to do some Azo Gold and some Titan Buff. The Azo Gold is kind of like an orangey brown sienna color. It's really, really pretty. It definitely has a warm tone to it. And this will be my layer that I will use to pull this print. I am using some 110 pound Nina White cardstock for this print. I left this print to dry for about 25 to 30 minutes. And I was already loving how this print looked. I love the greens that kind of came together from mixing the blue and the yellow. Looks like almost a brown color from the Easel gold and the reds and oranges. And then the pops of the perfect pearl, you can see the purple and some of the gold shining through that texture of the honeycomb. And I just love how every time you turn it in the light, it takes on a different thing that it's focusing on in the whether it's the color or the shine. So I just love how that looks. And of course I want to try another one. I love trying these in a series because by changing your colors, by changing the way you lay down your paints or the textures, you just get a totally different look each time, even if you follow kind of like the same idea. So this time for my black, instead of just removing the black with a piece of paper, I put down these are just little handmade circle textures that I made just by hole punching through some paper. And so I'm putting those down and removing some of that paint with a brayer. And again, I'm just wanting to add a little bit of a different design to the background or to the black part of this print. And again, doing the same thing, I'm just pulling up what was coming up off of the black just to have a little bit of black texture on the gel plate. I'm using this smaller print of a stencil for my alcohol inks on this layer this time. And just going in with all of these colors for this print, and I will use some alcohol and my blower tool for this one. Only because these are so small, it's going to be harder to try to brayer in between these little lines. So this is just 91% alcohol. And I'll just keep adding alcohol wherever the alcohol seems to be drying, just so I can get it to move into all those little details of the stencil. Once I'm happy with how the color has been distributed, I will let this layer dry on top of the stencil and then remove my stencil just so that those alcohol ink areas don't blend right back out onto the gel plate. That's why I dried that one first. And then I'm using just some more of my Titan Buff. One thing I notice is the alcohol inks, even when they're dry or mostly dry, they'll still spread that color into the white paint that you put over the top of it. And I love that because it doesn't make it look so white, it has the color in it as well. So I am using more of my textures here to remove a lot of that paint, just so I have a nice design left on this one. And you can see this is just from my embossed piece, how cool that looks. And then I have a really nice leftover background and lots of gel plate exposed so that I can do my pearl powders again over this stencil. And I'll do the same steps that I did in the first print. I'm adding in some white and then some teal over the pearl powder layer. Just kind of blending those two colors together, and I'll get a nice light blue color. And this is the layer that I'm going to use to pull this print with, again, the 110 pound Nina white cardstock. And I also leave this one to set for about 35 minutes. And you can see this one has a lot more of like a bluish tone to it. And it's got those layers in there. You can see the grungy black layer. Then you've got the alcohol ink layer with the little text. I think it's just so beautiful. So for my next layer, I decided to mix it up a little bit and mix some teal, magenta, and white on my gel plate first and make kind of like a purple color by mixing these together. They're not perfectly mixed, so they do still show some of the blue, the white, and the pink, but I really like how this looks. I used a stencil from PM Artist Studio called Parisian Lattice. I'll link this one in the description. And I'm using tissue paper to remove what's left on the plate in between the stencil area. Again, I'm just trying to get that area clean so that I can add my alcohol inks right over the top of the stencil, remembering that I still have the acrylic paint underneath the stencil. And it's not necessarily dry. So here I will mix together or blend out with my blower tool these colors again. These are the warm colors still. And I'm using my alcohol to get those colors to move. And this time I don't let that layer dry completely for the alcohol ink, and I do remove the stencil. And then I will bring in this texture. This is a really cool texture that you can use for making glass paint or something. I'll link this one in the description as well. And then a few homemade textures that I have. This is another scripty embossed folder cardstock. And I will let this layer dry before I come in with this white paint. This is just titanium white. And you can see it's still taking on the colors of those alcohol inks, so it doesn't look white anymore. So for the texture on this one, I put down a little honeycomb die cut, and then using one of my embossed cardstock pieces right over the top. This has some fun little leaves and flowers. And I'll repeat the same thing over at the top. And I let that layer dry. And instead of using a stencil, because I have just little areas left over from the design that I pressed down, I'm just using my Perfect Pearls to go over those little exposed areas. Then I'll add more of my titanium white. I want to add enough that I can pull all of those layers up, because this will be my final layer over this print. And I press that down really well, and again I leave this one for another 30 to 35 minutes to dry. And this just looks so beautiful. I love the warm kind of purpley tones and pink tones in this one. You get a little splash of some green at the bottom there and some little pops of blue, but this one definitely has a warmer tone. The other two have cooler tones to them. And I just love how kind of mixing up the paint colors, the designs, and even like the little textures and layers totally transform how this kind of similar process turns your gel prints into something totally different. So I just love playing with this technique. And again, just mixing up my paint colors, which ones I use first, middle, last. When I throw my Perfect Pearls in, if it's a lot, if it's a little, just for a little touch of shine or a whole bunch of shine. So I hope you try this technique, and I hope that you found this helpful for learning how to build up layers that look really cool like this, especially kind of having a grungy look to them. But these will do great for tearing up in collages, also for card. I'm a card maker, so these will be great card backgrounds. I also like to use these to make some tags and a couple of other little projects, little mini books and stuff. So these will be beautiful for that. And you could always use tissue paper or copy paper if you wanted a lighter version of these versus the cardstock. So let me know which one was your favorite of these three styles. And I think for my favorite, I would have to say the middle one was probably my favorite, which was the first one. I just love how those colors came together and have a little bit of warm and a little little bit of cool, but it's got that black grungy layer that I just love. And I just love that pop of purple in there. So I think this one's my favorite. But anyway, love to hear from you, and I hope you're having a good day and a good weekend. And I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, happy crafting, y'all.